For over a decade, I've made content for YouTube, and more times than I can count, I've opened videos by saying something along the lines of, "This is one of the most disturbing mysteries I've ever covered." I suppose that's the inevitable result of staring into the abyss of the internet for long enough. The deeper you go, the darker the discoveries become. It's an endless black hole of obsession, violence, and moral decay. But today's subject genuinely stands apart. In my opinion, this case belongs to a tier of horror that most people never encounter, and frankly, never should. This video is not a guide, a roadmap, or an invitation to seek out the material I'll be discussing. The raw footage involved is something no one should ever go looking for. Anything I reference visually will be heavily cropped, obscured, or blurred. Though I should warn you now, even hearing about the details may be deeply unsettling. So if you're still here after that disclaimer, let's begin. Several months ago, I came across a Vice article written by Ben Ditto titled, "A Vietnamese Murder Has Given the World Its First Real Snuff Movie." The article detailed the emergence of 3 video clips that surfaced on the shock website Watch People Die in late July of 2025. Together, these clips became known as the Vietnamese Butcher. The most widely shared video in the collection, titled "The Execution," is deceptively simple and profoundly horrifying. The camera captures a top-down view of a man lying on a tarp spread across a tiled bathroom floor. Beneath his neck rests a wooden chopping block. He is pleasuring himself. In the background, faint sounds of barking dogs and passing vehicles can be heard, suggesting the footage was recorded in the middle of a populated area. What follows is anything but civilized. As the man announces that he is about to finish, a second figure, previously standing just out of frame, steps into view. Without hesitation, he raises a meat cleaver and in several brutal strikes severs the man's head. The act is captured in chilling clarity. Blood sprays across the room. The body convulses briefly, then goes limp. The executioner doesn't pause. He immediately begins working with mechanical precision, dragging the severed head out of frame and cutting into the body with practiced ease. Movements that strongly suggest this was not his first time. Through labored breathing, he slices from the neck straight down to the pubic bone, then splits the incision sideways. Moments later, the screen cuts to black. The video spread rapidly, even among Watch People Die's desensitized user base, people accustomed to witnessing death in its rawest forms. This footage felt different. It wasn't chaotic or opportunistic. It was staged. The lighting was deliberate, the framing intimate, and as would later be revealed, this was not filmed with a single camera. A second, longer clip eventually surfaced, shot from a low angle, depicting the same killing from another perspective, confirming that multiple cameras had been positioned around the room to capture the act in full. The next video in the series, filmed immediately afterward, became known as the butchering. It documents the victim's body being methodically dismembered. Limbs are separated and arranged. Organs are washed in a sink. Flesh is placed into pots and onto plates. Certain body parts are forced into the victim's mouth. But of the 3 videos that appeared in July, perhaps the most disturbing and most revealing was the first chronologically, a clip known as the rehearsal. It shows the victim still alive, inside what appears to be an office setting. He kneels, and places his head onto a chopping block. A second figure, wearing what looks like Adidas sportswear and a Guy Fawkes mask, brings the cleaver down toward the man's neck, not to kill him, but to demonstrate how the fatal blow will be delivered. Near the end of the clip, the kneeling man asks for the cameras to be turned off. The masked man comforts him. Both men stand. The video ends. The implications of those additional videos were unmistakable. The victim was not only aware he was being filmed, he appeared to be a willing participant. He had knowingly placed himself in front of the camera, allowed the rehearsal to be recorded, and seemingly consented to his own death for the explicit purpose of being butchered and consumed. As the morbidly curious soon discovered, the 3 Vietnamese Butcher videos were merely the surface layer of something far larger. They were part of a broader content pack. A collection of 11 video recordings and 98 photographs that was being advertised and sold through Telegram, an encrypted messaging platform notorious for its use among criminal networks due to its resistance to tracing and surveillance. Limited access to the pack reportedly cost around $100, while full access, including the most extreme material, was priced at approximately $600. According to multiple sources, the pack had been circulating quietly on the black market since February 2025, a full 5 months before fragments of it leaked onto Watch People Die. Not all of the material has surfaced publicly, but what has emerged is enough to unsettle even the most seasoned consumers of online gore. In one leaked series of photographs, the victim's heart, kidneys, and other organs are shown simmering in herbal stew alongside red dates and goji berries. In another, portions of human flesh appear to have been prepared as a curry dish. Elsewhere, the executioner poses in front of a mirror, holding the victim's freshly severed head like a grotesque trophy. Some claim to have seen yet another video, one in which the killer boils the head in a pot, though if it exists, it has not surfaced on the open web. Death has circulated freely on the internet for decades. Executions, accidents, murders. Countless clips have come and gone, but the Vietnamese Butcher struck differently. It didn't feel chaotic or incidental. It felt intentional, calculated, purpose-built. Vice went so far as to label it the first verified snuff video. In their article, snuff is defined as a murder filmed specifically for commercial distribution, not footage of a killing that happens to be recorded, and not a compilation of pre-existing violence. To qualify, the murder itself must be staged, filmed, and distributed with the primary intention of making money. By that definition, Vice argued, no true snuff films had ever been proven to exist. Until now, criminologists have long maintained that while real killings are often recorded, none had ever been committed primarily for profit. Pleasure, rage, fear, ideology? Yes. Money? No. At least not until this case. After reading the Vice article, I initially thought the mystery would make for a brief segment in one of my disturbing things I found on the internet videos. But when I tried to dig deeper, I hit a wall. No other English language outlets were covering it. No follow-ups appeared. No arrests were announced. I waited for more information. None came, and slowly the case faded from my mind. That is until last week, when I received a message from one of my viewers. I'll refer to this person simply as X. X urged me to revisit the Vietnamese Butcher case, claiming that major developments had occurred beneath the surface. They directed me to a 106-page investigative dossier compiled by a group known as OSINT and Cyber Investigation Vietnam, a community of independent digital investigators operating primarily through Facebook. For their own safety, the group used burner accounts and worked largely in the shadows. Over months, they had conducted an exhaustive open-source investigation, collecting digital breadcrumbs, archived posts, leaked images, metadata, and testimony, all with one goal: to identify the victim and unmask the killer. This is the story of their investigation. The OSINT group began where anyone would, by searching to see what information already existed. There was virtually nothing, despite the victim's face being clearly visible in the footage. No family members had come forward. No missing persons reports had been publicly connected to the videos. And there was no indication that Vietnamese authorities were actively investigating their origin. However, because the circumstances surrounding the case were so rare, the investigators had a strong sense of where to begin. Up until that point, there had only been 2 known cases in history in which one human being had allowed themselves to be killed and cannibalized by another. Both took place in Germany. The first was the infamous case of Armin Maivis, who killed and consumed Bernd Brandes, a willing volunteer. The second involved Detlef Genzel, a German police officer who murdered Polish businessman Wojciech Stempniewicz. Though there was never conclusive proof that Genzel ate his victim, their online chat history strongly suggested cannibalistic intent. In both cases, the participants met through online cannibalism forums, Cannibal Cafe and Zambian Meat, respectively. With that precedent in mind, OSINT investigators reasoned that the same was likely true here. Both the victim and the masked executioner spoke Vietnamese with native accents. The unofficial title, The Vietnamese Butcher, appeared accurate. And so, the group began combing through Vietnamese language online spaces dedicated to so-called long pork. It didn't take long. The victim was identified as a 36-year-old man named Nguyen Xuan Jat. Little is known about Jat's offline life. He kept to himself, had few real-world connections, and lived largely in isolation. But online, he inhabited a very different world. Since around 2019, Dat had been active on Motherless, an explicit file-sharing platform accessible only through VPNs and known for hosting some of the internet's most extreme and deviant material. Across Motherless and several other fringe forums, he used variations of the handle Dat Beheading. His posts were disturbingly consistent. They revolved around decapitation and cannibalism, not fantasies involving others, but fantasies involving himself. In one leaked message believed to have been written by Dat, he described his reasoning in bleak terms. Not only am I ugly, but I'm also full of diseases. I can't live freely like normal people. I've depended on my parents my whole life. What else could I do? I'm a prisoner of my own fate. Disillusioned with life, Dat withdrew from society and devoted himself entirely to a single obsession, what he referred to as his final fantasy. He openly discussed his desire to be executed at the peak of sexual pleasure, ideally by a female executioner, and then consumed afterward. In the online spaces he frequented, such fantasies were not only tolerated, they were encouraged. On a forum dedicated to Japanese manga, an Eroguro story titled Applicant for Death was translated into Vietnamese at the specific request of a user identified as Dat Beheading. The story depicts a man having his head severed with a katana while in bed with 2 women, his consciousness lingering just long enough to describe the sensation. To investigators, it read less like entertainment and more like a blueprint. For years, Dat actively searched for someone willing to help him fulfill this fantasy. Over time, he assembled a small online circle of individuals with similarly extreme psychological fixations. But there was a problem. Despite his efforts, he failed to find a female executioner. Later, OSINT members uncovered an account on a gay forum believed to belong to Dat. In one post, he had publicly shared his mobile phone number. Using open-source techniques, investigators traced the number to a Zalo account listing his date of birth as March 10, 1989. Cross-referencing that information led to a registry entry in a village in Tai Bin province. Two investigators contacted the village head directly. He confirmed that a man named Nguyen Xuan Dat had once lived there, but had left the village after his father's death. His mother, reportedly struggling with mental health issues, had lost contact with him entirely. That explained why no one had come forward when the videos surfaced. While some investigators focused on official records, others began reaching out directly to the few contacts listed on Jat's Facebook profile, hoping someone might respond with useful information. Most didn't, but one did. The individual used the alias Philae, and they were no stranger to the subject matter. Philae was a fellow decapitation fantasist who claimed to have met Jat once, briefly, in real life. According to them, Jat worked as a fishmonger at Phung Quang Market in Hanoi. More importantly, Philae said they knew the man responsible for Jat's death. A man both of them had interacted with extensively online. A man known as Chung. According to Philae and several others in their circle, Jat had been communicating with Chung for a long time. However, their relationship was strained. Jat had grown increasingly frustrated with Chung's reluctance to commit to a specific execution date. Eventually that changed. Chung agreed to carry out the killing at a predetermined time and place. As evidence, Philae provided a screenshot that sent a chill through the investigation. Shortly after the execution, a private message was sent from Jat's own account to one of his contacts. The message was brief, clinical. Dat has been beheaded. This strongly suggested that Chung not only had access to Jat's social media accounts, but was actively using them, possibly to maintain contact with others in their morbid network, possibly to search for his next victim. Investigators continued messaging anyone who had interacted with Jat online, including members of a male homosexual group called Likes Beheading. One user, operating under the name Ho Troy, responded and claimed outright to be the killer seen in the videos. The confession was short, and then Ho Troy went silent. Soon after, archived exchanges between Ho Troy and other users surfaced. In them, he offered what he described as murder services. At this point, OSINT investigators believed one of three possibilities had to be true. Either Ho Troy was role-playing, inserting himself into the case for attention, or Ho Troy was simply another alias used by the real executioner, Chung. Or, most disturbingly, Ho Troy was another victim, whose account Chung now controlled. As investigators dug deeper into Jat's digital footprint, a timeline began to emerge, and it was disturbingly coherent. January 25th, 2025. Jat posted a cryptic Facebook status reading, 3 hours left until the execution. That same day, all of his other known forum accounts recorded their final activity. Investigators widely believe this was the day Jat was killed. February 25th, 2025. A message was sent from Jat's account to one of his contacts explaining that he was dead. It is believed this message was sent by Chung. That same month, the Vietnamese Butcher content was offered for sale on the black market. June 10th, 2025. Judd's Facebook account posted its final status update. From today, I'm logging off this account for good. Further evidence that someone else was maintaining his profile. After that post, the page remained online until July, when the videos surfaced publicly. Once the account began receiving attention, it was manually deleted. Proving this timeline definitively would require law enforcement level access to back-end data. But to those following the trail, it painted a grimly consistent picture. The investigators had identified the victim. They had narrowed down the date of death. But the most critical question remained unanswered. Who was Chung? Some attempted to argue that Chung had done nothing wrong, that because Judd willingly offered his life, no crime had been committed. That argument doesn't hold up. In no country on earth is it legal to kill another person with their consent. While euthanasia exists in limited forms, it is restricted to specific medical circumstances, governed by strict legal frameworks, and carried out by licensed professionals. Anything outside of that framework is still homicide. Whoever Chung was, he was guilty of murder. And more troubling still, if he was willing to fulfill Judd's fantasy, how many others might he have targeted? How many vulnerable individuals had crossed his path? How many might still be at risk? Identifying him became imperative. Fortunately, investigators had something tangible to work with. In one leaked photograph, Chung appears in a mirror holding Judd's severed head. Though partially obscured, enough of his body was visible to extract identifying details. He had a stocky build, a receding or balding hairline, a visible scar over one eyebrow, monolid eyes. He wore a green mask that some speculated resembled military-issued gear. Most notably, he had a distinctive birthmark pattern across his arm and armpit, and a tattoo reading that day 13-9. Netizens began dissecting the executioner's surroundings. In the butchering video, Chung moves through what appears to be a small kitchen. The floor tiles are blue and white. The baseboards are red. The door is green. The walls around the counter are tiled in red. The countertop is white. At one point, a Levi water bottle is visible on a table. Near the sink, a yellow bottle of Chinese brand dishwashing liquid sits in frame. Viewers familiar with Vietnam noted that the decor, utensils, and cleaning products were commonly seen in northern border provinces, narrowing the geographic search. But despite months of scrutiny, the trail went cold. By late August, the investigation stalled. Judd's accounts were locked. All early suspects were cleared. Discussion threads slowed, then faded entirely. It seemed inevitable that the Vietnamese butcher would become another unsolved internet mystery, whispered about, archived, and eventually forgotten. Until it wasn't. In the third week of November, 2025, an anonymous Facebook user came forward. We'll refer to them as the whistleblower, WB. WB claimed to have been in direct contact with both Judd and the executioner. They released screenshots of their final conversation with Judd, dated January 25, 2025. At 2:40 p.m., Judd wrote that the execution would occur in roughly 3 hours, placing his time of death between 5:30 and 6 p.m. He also mentioned that he had shared WB's information with the executioner, suggesting that WB at one point may have been a potential next victim. But WB changed their mind. Instead of stepping forward to be butchered, they stepped forward to expose the man responsible, stating that consent did not absolve murder. and that Jat's killer needed to face justice. Most critically, WB shared chat logs with a man operating under the Facebook name Cam Than Chung. In one chilling message, Chung stated, "Dat's bones have already become fertilizer." He invited WB to meet in person to discuss their own beheading. He provided an address, a specific street in Hu Long Town, Lang Son Province, near a government tax office. For the first time, the investigation had something concrete, a full name, and a physical location. At this point, the investigation drew the attention of a Vietnamese YouTube channel known as Ke To Mo, translated roughly as The Curious One. The creator had been following the case closely, producing detailed breakdowns and even 3D reconstructions of the suspected crime scenes. Now armed with a name and an address, he began cross-referencing everything the OSINT community had uncovered with public records and social media profiles. According to him, the pieces finally aligned. He claimed he had identified the killer. But before he could release any further information, something alarming happened. The creator abruptly posted a message stating that the investigation would end immediately. He wrote that the forces behind this are too powerful enough to swallow our entire team. He added that if anything were to happen to him, all of the information he had collected would be released automatically. Alongside that warning, he shared a single image, the face of the suspect, and a blurred screenshot of one of the usernames connected to the case. It didn't take long for internet sleuths to unblur the name, Thanchung 111111. From there, the digital web began to unravel. The handle, Thanchung, often followed by a string of ones, appeared across multiple platforms. Anonymous forums, Instagram, TikTok, and messaging apps. Several of those accounts linked to a Twitter profile named Don Zangles. That account, in turn, traced back to a Facebook profile belonging to a man named Juan Van Sang. At first glance, Sang appeared unremarkable. He was a married father of two in his late 50s, living in Lang Son, a province near the Chinese border. He was a retired deputy head of a market management department M&D team, responsible for inspecting and regulating suspect goods. He also served as the head of Lang Son City's Juan family clan, a large extended family with thousands of registered members. His photos depicted a comfortable life, a respected bureaucrat, a man with status, authority, and deep ties to local government, not only through his own career, but through his wife and son as well. Could this really be the man known as Chung? Then investigators noticed something impossible to ignore. Sang's eldest son was named Than Chung, and his birthday? September 13th, the same date tattooed on the executioner's arm. That day 13-9. Coincidence quickly gave way to suspicion. Further scrutiny revealed that the clothes worn by Sang's son in several photos matched perfectly with the Adidas sportswear seen in the rehearsal video. While some speculated the son might have been involved, the masked executioner's physique, the receding hairline, the stocky build, more closely resembled Sang himself. Perhaps he borrowed his son's clothes. Perhaps they owned matching outfits. Either way, private messages sent from the Kam Than Chung account included photographs that strongly suggested the person behind the profile was not the son, but Sang, and that his child's name was being used as digital camouflage. Once Juan Van Sang emerged as the primary suspect, investigators began scrutinizing every available image tied to him, both recent and long forgotten. The similarities were unsettling. In older photos pulled from a secondary Facebook account Zhang had abandoned years earlier, users noticed a circular birthmark on his shin, identical in size and placement to one visible on the executioner's leg in the execution footage. A second birthmark on his right bicep and armpit closely matched the distinctive markings seen in the butcher's mirror photo. Scars on Sang's face aligned with those visible on the masked man. His hairline and facial structure were eerily consistent. Even the placement of the tattoo appeared to match. Then came another detail. In one photograph, taken outside Sang's home, a pair of flip-flops sat near the doorway, identical to those worn by the executioner during the killing. Individually, these details might have been dismissed. Together, they painted a chilling picture. Investigators dug deeper. A TikTok video surfaced showing Sang filming inside an MMD office, identified as Market Management Team Number 3. The background: plastic plants, blue fan blades, misaligned cabinets, matched perfectly with the office seen in the rehearsal video. Another breakthrough came from a local news article referencing Sang's former workplace, Market Management Team Number 4, where he had served as deputy head. The article included a photograph of Sang inspecting goods, and behind him was a kitchen. The same kitchen. Green doors, red wall tiles, blue and white patterned floor, white countertop, red trim. Every detail aligned with the kitchen shown in the butchering footage. The only location still unconfirmed was the bathroom seen in the execution video. It appeared generic, tiled, sterile, easily overlooked. But common sense suggested something crucial. Why would a killer transport a freshly executed body to a second location for dismemberment? The simplest answer was also the most disturbing. The execution and the butchering happened in the same building. And soon, leaked images from inside Team Number 4's restroom began circulating. They matched perfectly. The space has since been grimly dubbed by netizens as the most depressing toilet in the world. One final question lingered. Why would a government official commit a murder inside his own workplace? It seemed reckless until investigators considered the date. January the 25th marked the beginning of Tet, Vietnam's Lunar New Year. Government offices would have been completely deserted. On top of that, a market management department facility would naturally contain cooking equipment and an incinerator used for destroying confiscated goods. Sang had reportedly volunteered to remain on site during the holiday, staying at the office for 5 days while other employees took leave, alone, with access and no witnesses. As the digital net tightened around Joan Van Sang, investigators made a disturbing discovery. He had been watching them. Quietly, Sang had joined multiple online communities discussing the case, including the very OSINT Facebook group responsible for exposing him. Using burner accounts, he monitored posts, tracked new findings, and even commented on updates. At times, he reacted with laughing emojis when users expressed frustration over the investigation stalling. To some, this behavior suggested a man savoring the thrill of being the hidden villain, watching thousands inch closer to the truth without realizing he was among them. But once his name surfaced publicly, that composure collapsed. Sang began posting erratic and deeply unsettling messages directly to the group's timeline. "I am the executioner. Who can catch me? You are the real executioners. You want more people to die so you can celebrate. I've lived 60 years in this world. I'm no longer afraid of death. He went further. Anyone who wants to meet me is invited to my house. Who exposed me? Show yourself. To some observers, this looked like the desperate flailing of a guilty man unraveling under pressure. To others, it resembled the panicked confusion of someone being falsely accused on an unimaginable scale. Fueling the chaos, Sang's son entered the conversation, defending his father in an equally disturbing manner. He posted a photograph of his lunch with the caption, "Come on, it's just a few pieces of human meat." The image was later deleted. Whether it was an attempt at dark humor, provocation, or something more sinister, no one could say. Digital forensics soon added yet another layer. Multiple users attempted password resets on 2 email addresses linked to Song. Both triggered 2-factor authentication alerts routed through the same device, an Oppo Reno 12 5G. When investigators attempted a password reset for an email tied to Jat's phone number, the alert once again pinged that same device. Another coincidence or another confirmation? Analyzing the online footprint connected to Sang's various aliases revealed a disturbing evolution. Over 2 decades, his activity shifted from seeking casual encounters on gay forums to cultivating a dominant master persona, one centered on control, humiliation, pain, and eventually mutilation. By 2022, Sang had uploaded images of a dismembered body to an online forum, claiming he wanted to toughen up other members. The images were later removed. Their origin remains unknown. Other screenshots show him attempting to purchase severed body parts from suppliers in southern Vietnam. Parts believed to have originated from gender affirmation surgeries or from individuals willing to sell pieces of themselves for money. In the eyes of the Vietnamese online community, the mountain of evidence, physical markings, locations, digital trails, devices, behavior had become overwhelming. All that remained was official action. After months of mounting digital evidence and public pressure, authorities finally acted. On November 28, 2025, it was quietly announced that Joan Van Sang had been arrested. Investigators immediately secured the suspected crime scene, conducting a meticulous forensic examination of the Market Management Department facilities. The findings were gruesome. Under the kitchen sink, forensic teams discovered 3 teeth suspected to be human. Bone fragments were recovered from multiple locations. The septic tank in the restroom, the drainage cavity in the kitchen, and even water channels behind the building. Each fragment was carefully catalogued, and testing was underway to confirm their origin. During a subsequent search of Sang's home, investigators seized 2 jackets matching the executioner's clothing from the rehearsal video, alongside a space heater identical to the one seen in the execution footage. They also recovered a mobile phone believed to have belonged to Jat, though it was being used at the time by Sang's elder sister. She later stated that Sang had handed it to her for safekeeping. When confronted, Sang admitted responsibility for the Vietnamese Butcher killings. His official confession, as reported by authorities, was chilling in its clinical detachment. Around 2020, Sang became acquainted with Jat through social media. Over months of conversation, Jat revealed his involvement in a group operating on Motherless, a forum for extreme sexual and violent content. Jat repeatedly invited Sang to join. Initially, Sang was repulsed and refused, but gradually, through repeated exposure and research into extreme sexual violence, homosexual domination, and cannibalistic fantasies, he became intrigued. Over time, he adopted a dominant executioner persona. By July 2024, he had agreed to fulfill Jat's fantasy. Jat reportedly offered over 10 million dong, approximately 380 USD, to rent a location suitable for the act. On January the 25th, 2025, Sang summoned Jat to the market management building. Jat brought 2 cleavers, tools for the act. Around dusk, Sang executed him exactly as depicted in the circulated videos. After the killing, Sang dismembered the body, separating bones, flesh, and internal organs. Some parts were boiled to slow decomposition and reduce odor. Bones and flesh were packed into approximately 10 plastic bags, with a small portion reportedly fed to dogs. The weapons, the 2 cleavers, were disposed of on January 27, 2025, placed into a handcart container parked roadside. Following the incident, Sang returned to work as if nothing had happened. While some observers argue that Sang's confession portrays him as manipulated or hypnotized by Jat, the evidence contradicts this. He had decades of online activity exploring violence and cannibalism, actively sought out participants, and even attempted to recruit others, including the whistleblower, as potential victims. Thanks to the relentless OSINT investigation, Joan Von Zang would face trial. Depending on how proceedings unfold, he could be sentenced to the death penalty. With Sang in custody, one question remained. Does this case qualify as a snuff film? According to the definition popularized by Vice, a snuff film is a murder produced primarily for profit, not for pleasure, not for shock, and not to inspire fear, but specifically to be sold. In this instance, evidence suggests otherwise. Sang filmed the videos to fulfill his own twisted desires, not for financial gain. Distribution of the content may have occurred afterward, but profit appeared secondary to his obsession. Yet even this does not fully capture the darkness of the situation. Before the footage surfaced publicly, it circulated on encrypted messaging apps through unknown Chinese-speaking individuals. It remains unclear whether Sang sold the material himself, shared it with his online network, or if other black market actors were involved in producing or distributing these so-called home movies. This has led to chilling speculation that Sang may not have been a lone predator. Instead, he might have been part of a broader network operating across East and Southeast Asia, a shadowy marketplace trading in real human suffering. Other cases with disturbing parallels have already begun to emerge. On the Chinese platform Baidu Tiba, anonymous users reportedly sell footage of dismembered men. Posts describe everything from executions to necrophilia, categorized under euphemisms like forensic for pure body content. The Vietnamese Butcher then could represent just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a glimpse into a hidden and unthinkably brutal corner of the dark web. While the global scope of these activities remains largely unknown, what is certain is the immense impact on ordinary people. The story of Jat and Sang has shocked Vietnam to its core. The OSINT investigators, YouTubers, and online sleuths who brought this case to light ensured that it would not disappear quietly, swallowed by the next wave of headlines. It is worth repeating, do not search for any of the media discussed in this video. It is illegal in many countries, deeply traumatizing, and carries risks beyond the psychological. All credit for uncovering this horrifying mystery goes to the OSINT and Cyber Investigation Vietnam Facebook group, their collaborators worldwide, and the investigative work of YouTuber The Curious One. Special thanks also to the anonymous viewer, known as X, whose tips kept this case alive and helped expose the truth. Finally, to those following along, the world is far darker than most people imagine, but shining a light on these shadows is essential. The Vietnamese butcher case stands as a grim reminder. The internet is an endless abyss, and some horrors are real, not fictional. It is our responsibility to remember, report, and never forget, ensuring that victims like Chart are honored and perpetrators like Sang face justice.